Today I'm going to be making sourdough bread for you guys two different ways, one with a scale and one with cup measurements. These are from the sourdough starters that I showed you in my last video that I created for you. I'm Rebekah with Learning Together by Grace, Homemaking God's Way. Let's go. All right, you guys, so here are my sourdough starters. This is the tablespoon measured one. I fed it the night before. I did 3 tablespoons of flour, 3 tablespoons of water, and 3 tablespoons of sourdough starter and mixed it together. With my scale starter, I did 50 grams of starter, 50 grams of water, and 50 grams of flour. These are all of the things that I will need in order to do my scale sourdough bread. So I am going to make sure that I link the recipe for you guys in the description down below to my blog so that you can have this simple recipe. I try to keep it as simple as possible with the measurements so that you guys can follow along. All right, so I started off with 100 grams of active sourdough starter. Like I said before in my previous video, you want to make sure that your starter is rising to peak, and basically it's going to look like there's a dome on top and there's a lot of bubbles in it. Now it can begin to slightly descend, and that's fine, but you don't want it to descend too much. I just added in 300 grams of water, and I am using my dough spatula or my dough whisk in order to just mix all of that together. Now we're going in with the flour. I use all-purpose flour. A lot of recipes will call for bread flour, but I have found that the Costco organic all-purpose flour works beautifully for me. I've compared it with the bread flour and I get the exact same results. So everyone will be different. Right here, I added 500 grams of all-purpose flour to my starter. So I'm just mixing all of that together until it forms a shaggy dough. This is what you want it to look like when you are done mixing it all together. And then after this, what I do is just cover it for an hour and I allow it to auto-lease. And that is essentially allowing all of that water to be absorbed into the flour. It's supposed to make for a better dough at the end. And then what I do here is measure out my salt, and I just place it on top of my plate, and I will add it after it gets done with that hour of auto-leasing. Alrighty, so now we're moving on to the tablespoon measured sourdough bread dough. And for this, I use 1/4 cup of sourdough starter. Now, I'm just keeping it basic. Some recipes you'll see out there will require a little bit more starter, like a 1/2 cup of starter. But for me, I wanted to do 1/4 or 1/4 of a cup of starter just to keep it simple for you guys and for you to see that it doesn't necessarily take a whole lot of starter in order for you to create a sourdough bread. So I'm adding this to my bowl, trying to scrape every little bit off as I possibly can. And then after that, I am going to go in with my water, and I just measured out 1.5 cups of water. I am using filtered water from my Berkey. You can use filtered water, or you can use spring water or purified water from the grocery store if you desire. And so after that, I just use my spatula just to mix it all up. I'm just showing you guys different utensils that you can use to help mix up your dough. You can even use a fork or a spoon, just as long as it's stainless steel. It cannot be metal because it will react with the dough. All right, I'm going in with my all-purpose flour, and I use 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour for my tablespoon measured sourdough starter. Again, this is going to be a nice shaggy dough when I am done mixing all of that together. And after that, I'm going to do the exact same thing as I did with the scale starter, and I'm going to cover it with a plate. You can use plastic wrap. You can, if you have a bowl with a top on it, you can use that, and you cover that up and allow it to auto-lease for that 1 hour. And then you have the salt here, and I'm measuring out 2 teaspoons of salt and just putting it on top of it so that I know that after that hour is done, I need to add my salt to my dough. All right, you guys, so now that it's been an hour, I have wet hands and I'm adding my salt. And again, this was 10 grams of salt for the scale measured dough. And what I do is just kind of scoop underneath my dough and I lift it up to stretch it and then fold it over itself. And then I'll slightly turn my bowl, as you guys see here, and I'll scoop up another side and I'll lift it up to stretch it and then fold it over. These are called stretch and folds. These are essentially fancy versions of kneading. It's just that you're not having to put a whole lot of work into kneading. Now here is my tablespoon sourdough dough that I'm doing the same thing to. I washed my hands to make sure that they were wet in between, and I'm literally just lifting up that dough and I'm stretching it as best as I can. Some doughs may feel a little bit thicker. With this tablespoon measured dough, it is a little bit thicker than my scale dough, and that's fine. It's going to work out. So sometimes I will have to kind of just shake the dough alongside the bowl in order to get it to stretch and fold for me. All right, after I do that, I just kind of tuck them away into a nice little ball and scrape off any excess dough on the side and cover it up. And then I will allow it to rest for 20 minutes. So what I do is 5 sets of stretch and folds. The first one is right after that hour is up. And then after that, I will go and set my timer for 20 minutes. And after that 20 minutes is up, I'll do another set of stretch and folds. I try to do 6 stretch and folds per session, I should say. And I feel like this just kind of gives it a nice structure, and it helps to produce the gluten a lot better. That is the perfect purpose for your stretch and folds with your dough. All right, so now I'm going to do the exact same thing with my tablespoon measured dough. Now, I want to make mention here that sometimes it can be hard to get that 5th or 6th stretch and fold. Again, if your dough is really thick, then it can be a little challenging to do that. That's okay. We want to really just think about the gluten development when we're doing our stretch and folds. And sometimes what I'll do is kind of put the dough in my hand and kind of just massage it just really briefly, not too long, so that I can get, if I couldn't get that 5th and 6th stretch and fold, then I can, just give it a little bit more activity with massaging it. So from here on out, I'm just going to speed up the process for you guys so that you don't have to watch me do all of the stretch and folds, but I will slow down a bit so that you guys can see the dough as I'm stretching and folding it. But I just want to talk a little bit more about just the sourdough process. There are so many different things that are out there for sourdough bread making. And I feel like with my research over the last 2.5 years, I kind of got scared to do sourdough bread because there were just so many nuances. And with me, I like to have things perfect when I start, even though I've never tried something before. So with my sourdough journey, what I have done is just take my time, not stress it, and do what I felt was right for my sourdough. And with doing that, it has created an easier, stress-free sourdough journey for me. All right, I want to pause here from that conversation and just talk about what I'm doing here. I like to, if I have time, sometimes I don't do this, but I'll add my dough to a glass bowl that has a lid on it. And I do this so that it is easier for me to see the activity that's going on with my dough. I would suggest something like this for you when you're starting off with your sourdough making, because that way you can actively see what's going on with your dough. And so I got these bowls from Walmart. They were easy. I think they were like $4. So they're easy to use with sourdough. And basically what I do is measure, and I will put the time stamp of when I started the fermentation process and draw a line. And then after that, like you saw right here, I put the final time for you guys so that you can see how long it took for my dough to begin rising. As you can see, there are bubbles in there and it's very active. This particular one with a tablespoon measurement, it needed just a little bit more time in my opinion. There were bubbles like within the layers of the dough, but I like to see bubbles on top of the dough. So I just gave it just a couple more hours almost to do a little bit more bulk fermenting or rising, if you will. And you can see that the bubbles started to produce a little bit better. Now, this next clip is something that I got from another video that I created. This is the same sourdough starter, but I lost some of my footage, but the process is still the same. After you get done with your bulk fermentation, what you do is just kind of stretch out your dough the way that I'm doing here. If you want to use a rolling pin, you can. Depending on how sticky your dough is, you might want to put a little bit of flour underneath it. And then I'll just fold it twice over itself, and then I'll take the long edges and then I'll just fold it over itself again. And then you'll see me kind of just here, just turning the dough around, and you can kind of see bubbles are popping up as you are turning the dough around and working it. So I'll just turn it around and then I'll just gently glide the dough towards me. And often I'll stop and do what I'm doing here and just kind of getting those creases a little bit tighter. And I'll continue to kind of work the dough in that manner until I feel that it is tight enough. Now here I'm just showing you some of the air bubbles. That's basically the carbon monoxide or dioxide from the wild yeast in your sourdough that is causing the bubbles to form. And that is a good sign that you have gotten a good fermentation. All right, again, here I'm just stretching out my tablespoon measured sourdough, and I'm going to do the exact same process and just fold the dough over itself 2 times, and then I will take the long edges and just kind of roll it. And you guys, don't make a big fuss about this. Yes, there are probably more perfect ways to do this, but what I have found is that you do what works for you. Now with this particular dough, it was a little bit stickier. I believe I added a little bit more water. Again, this is a clip from another sourdough that I did a few days later, and I think I added a little bit more water to it, so it was stickier. And I'm using my dough scraper to help me with tightening up my dough, and literally just scooping it underneath and just turning it around and doing that several times. After I do that, I just allow my dough to rest for 20 minutes and then I'll shape my dough. So now I'm back to the original clip here, as you can see, and I'm just showing you guys where I do my final shape of my dough just to get the dough a little bit tighter so that when it is in the refrigerator, it doesn't spread out too much. Now, you can use bannetons to proof your dough in the refrigerator, or cold retard. People call it cold retard or refrigerator fermenting. It really is still fermenting. It's just fermenting at a lower rate. And you don't have to do this step. I like to do this step because it gives me a little bit more control of when I can bake my dough. And I feel like this is just better for my particular schedule, because at this point you can either allow it to ferment a couple more hours so that it can rise a little bit more on your counter and then bake it at night, or either like I'm doing, I put it in the refrigerator and I allow it to cold retard anywhere from 8 to 24 hours, just depending on my schedule. And so as it's cold retarding, again, like I said, it is still fermenting. It's just fermenting at a slower rate. Now, this is me heating up my oven. And so what I do, I take a cake pan and I add water to that cake pan. I fill it about 3/4 of the way up. I put it on my top rack. And so I actually raise my top rack to the highest point. And then I'll take a Dutch oven that I got from the thrift store. It was like $5. And then I take another cast iron pan and I place it on top of that Dutch oven. And I heat my oven up for 1 hour so that it is nice and warm and steamy from that water. Now, after that, once that hour is up, I take my dough out of the refrigerator and then I score it. So this is the scale sourdough that I'm doing right now. With me, I do have a razor, but I don't have like a lame for scoring my dough. I just use my bread knife. And honestly, I feel like this has been the easiest for me. I've tried the razors. They don't work for me. So that's another thing. You guys do what you feel is best for you and your scoring. After that, I just take the lid off of my Dutch oven and I add some rice to the bottom of my Dutch oven. This helps keep the bottom of your bread from burning. Trust me, you guys, it works. You can also try doing like some pizza stones. I have 2 pizza stones and I'll do that, but I still find that it still burns. So this is the method that has worked the best for me. So after that, I put my dough in there, parchment paper and all, and I cover it. And then I will set my oven for 35 minutes and I bake it covered for that entire time. And once it's done, I am finished. Now you have the option to close that oven up and bake your bread for 10 more minutes so that you can get a harder outer layer. My family, we do not like that harder outer layer. I mean, I don't mind it. I actually like it, but my husband and children don't. So for them, I don't bake it any longer. But for you, if you like a harder crust, bake it uncovered for 10 minutes. Now, as you saw, I did put my thermometer in there just to show you the temperature of your dough. It should range anywhere from 205 degrees Fahrenheit to 215 degrees Fahrenheit. That way you know that it is fully baked. So I just finished up with my tablespoon measured sourdough, and this is the result of that. This one I ended up doing the thermometer a little bit later, but it still read 206 degrees, I believe. So I was good with that. Now I'm just cutting into the dough so that you can see this is literally my first bake from both of the breads. Now, again, with me not doing that last 10 minutes uncovered, I feel like it makes my doughs a lot softer, like my bread a lot softer, and I love that. All right, so now I'm cutting into the tablespoon measured sourdough bread, and this is what it looks like. I can say that this one was a little bit over fermented, and you can see a slight difference in the dough. So this is the tablespoon measured one. It's a little bit flatter, and the inside crumb is just a little bit gummier. So this is how I like to store my sourdough bread. I just put it in my cake stands and I leave it on my counter, and my family will come and cut some. We have a cutting board right next to it, and we will cut some as we so please. And that is all, you guys. So I'm going to show you 2 more breads that I baked with these same sourdough starters, and you can see how the bake gets better with time, and you can see those beautiful holes. So this is the scale dough that I did, and as you can see, even the spring is a lot nicer on these breads after allowing my starter to be a little bit more mature. And as you go along, you're going to see that. All right, I'm going to show you one more bread that I baked with those 2 sourdough starters, and even the outside of the breads are looking better, and it will just get better with time. So I want to encourage you guys, be patient, take your time, don't stress. Sourdough does not have to be that complicated. If you want to get better at it, you guys just keep working at it. It will get better and you can continue to learn and grow as I'm doing with my starters. And you guys, you find what works best for you and your family. I'm just another option out here for you guys to learn from. Thank you guys so much for coming along for this journey. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share. Leave me a comment below letting me know if you are interested in sourdough and if you tried it. Hit the notification bell so that you know when I post another video. God bless you and take care. Bye.